The love of self is one of the most difficult and sensitive topics about love. Humans are prone to self-love, which is part of their nature. Self-love is what makes humans take all necessary measures for survival. It was mentioned in the dystopian Utopia. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows a form of an empirical attempt to explain it. When considering this theory, we can see it crystal clear that the way to self-actualization is based off taking all things that one needs or wants. Being complemented by the supplements will make one reach self-actualization based on this theory. And to clarify, he categorized three main needs, which are basic, psychological, and self-fulfillment, which are further subcategorized. The basic needs are subcategorized into physiological and safety needs. Physiological include drinking water, eating, and sleeping. Safety include being or feeling secured. The psychological needs are subcategorized into belonging and esteem. Belonging include having an intimate relationship. Esteem include feelings of accomplishments. And finally, the self-fulfillment needs is subcategorized into only self-actualization, which he defines as achieving one's full potential. Self-love is also hugely described by the id in the Freudian theory, where it is based off the pleasure principle. And sadly, since pleasure is good, people put it as the goal of goals and lay off their lives based off this principle. There is something extraordinarily crucial here. Many people make the deadly mistake of loving themselves to the point of worshipping themselves. Because it is in themselves that the feelings of joy, pleasure, and many other desired feelings are produced. And that results mostly in impulsive, dangerous acts. No room for helping others if there will be no benefit for me. No room for altruism. They become selfish. And to justify their actions, they say, "We do it because love is the existential relationship between the supplement and the complemented. And the self is me, so I should be giving everything to myself and just screw everything and everyone else." But that is extremely bad and wrong, because it repeats the same mistake of the money worshippers, assigning an evanescent thing as one that is worth of worship, which in this case is the self. But not only that, it also results in impulsive, selfish behaviors. But let us stop a little bit and ask, why impulsive, selfish acts are bad? Let's answer by an example. Imagine if someone bothered those self-worshippers and made them really angry. Now, because they worship themselves, one of the things to do that will supplement or gratify them would be cursing and or punching and even killing that person who bothered them. But here is where things fall apart. They will sacrifice themselves for themselves. Let me explain. John Piaget, who's a Swedish psychologist, put this in such a profound way. Basically, the theory begins with the concept of self. And this is where everything went wrong for these self-worshippers. The self is a complex idea, but John Piaget makes you think about it more clearly. Basically, you should ask whose self-interest are you going to satisfy when you want to make any act. You may say, myself. But then, who do you mean you? Or to put it more precisely, When do you mean you? Is it you now, or you later? And if it's you later, when is it? Long or short term? And when it is long or short, what is the exact duration? In our case, if they killed the person who bothered them, they satisfied their short-term self in expense of sacrificing the long-term self, because they will sacrifice themselves being in prison later, or at least always being on the run or hiding, meaning not being stable. And despite what you may think, impulsive selfish acts do not have to involve other people. If, for example, you want to do something impulsive like eating a lot of delicious chocolate and junk food every day, which will serve your short term, but you will have to sacrifice the long-term self for that, and who knows, the results may be as devastating as having diabetes or even a heart attack. But that is not to say that you should always sacrifice the short term for the long term. In fact, doing just that may result in not living in the moment, not appreciating what you have, and losing the sense of place, which is also a complex idea that may be discussed in a later series. The conception of self is wrong in the minds of most people, and when they build on that wrong conception, they lead a very, very bad life. Because what is built on the wrong will be wrong. You see, when you are doing something such as eating, you are serving the short-term self to about 1 to 2 hours in the future, which varies from person to person. When you are studying productively for a hard exam, you are serving the long-term self. But here, you should wonder, if I am serving something, I am also simultaneously sacrificing something else, right? And here is where the idea of sacrifice emerges. You don't get to not sacrifice anything. You only get to choose what to sacrifice, which is why you should make a wise choice. The self-worshippers have an even harder choice to make. They should choose which of their gods they will sacrifice, meaning they will sacrifice their god for their god. However, as they are self-worshippers, they cannot and almost entirely will not sacrifice the short term for the long term, because the future is an unknown for all of us. So, how can the self-worshippers sacrifice themselves now that they know is actual for the other better self that may not be? Which results in impulsive, extremely dangerous acts. Murder, genocide, torture, rape, drug abuse, hypocrisy, fraud, lies. And that will still not be enough, because these things may give them a feeling they seek, but for how long? Not only that, but they themselves will introduce another problem. They will dig in themselves a hole that needs to be filled, which is not living up to their potential. It will bring them intense misery, resentment, malevolence, and anger in a pathological package, because they are sacrificing their better God. And while sacrifice is done to make things better, for the self-worshippers it is making things worse, because their short-term self or God is incapable of helping them and or even betrayed them, which means they have been betrayed by their perfection. But because they still believe that their self is the goal of goals, it can still grant them with perfection. So they will try to gratify themselves, since the core of their being is themselves. They will do anything, even if it is the worst thing in the world. But in the end, nothing they do will ever fill the place of perfection, leaving them nihilistic, drug addicts, and suicidal.